Welcome to your Get That Nugget for GCSE Maths. Today we'll be concentrating on giving you a framework to answer proportion style questions. This session is to complement your lessons with your teachers and is not to replace them in any way. Okay, so what we're going to look at today is some general proportion style questions. Now you can get lots of different proportion questions, you can get recipe questions. We're not going to focus on those because there is a separate recipes video. We're just going to look at some general proportion questions. What you will also be able to do is direct and inverse proportion using formulae. That is on higher tier only, and again that will be in a separate video. These proportion questions are a foundation and higher tier crossover, and they're the more worded style proportion questions that you get. So example number 1 then, it costs 80p to buy 5 bananas. How much does it cost to buy 8 bananas? So this is a proportion question because it's telling us the cost of one thing in terms of another, and we need to use that to figure out how many for 8. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do 80 divided by 5. What that's going to do is tell me the cost of 1 banana. Now this kind of question you're not going to get on a calculator paper because it's quite nice, easy numbers. So 8 divided by 5 goes in once, remainder 3, and then 8 into 30 go in 6 times. So 1 banana then is 16p. How much does it cost to buy 8 bananas? So what we're then going to do is we're going to do 16 multiplied by 8. Now the method of multiplication that I'm going to use is Chinese multiplication. I personally think this is the best method of multiplication. You can use it for really, really large numbers. However, if you use a slightly different method, that absolutely is fine. So 16 multiplied by 8. 1 times by 8 gets us 8, and 6 times by 8 gets us 48. Underneath this diagonal is an 8. Underneath this diagonal, 4 add 8 gets me 12. So 2 there, carry the 1, and so that's a 1 there. So 16 times by 8 gets us 128p, or £1.28. So the cost of 8 bananas is £1.28. Okay, example number 2. 3 bottles of milk and 5 loaves of bread cost £9.58. 6 loaves of bread cost £7.32. How much does 1 bottle of milk cost? Now the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out 1 loaf of bread. And the way we're going to do that is £7.32, because that's the total cost, divided by 6 to figure out how much one of them costs. So 7 divided by 6, that gets me 1, remainder 1, so I'm going to carry the 1 over. Now when we're dividing decimals, remember we need to raise our decimal in the same position. 13 divided by 6 gets me 2, remainder 1. And then 12 divided by 6 also gets me 2. So 1 loaf of bread cost me £1.22. What I can then do is I can use that to figure out the cost of 3 bottles of milk, and then I can then figure out the cost of 1 bottle of milk. So what I then need to do is I need to do £1.22 times by 5. Now £1.22 times by 5, a quick way of doing this mentally is to do £1.22 times by 10, and that is going to get us £12.20, and then just half it to multiply it by 5. That's going to get us £6.10. So 5 loaves of bread then cost £6.10 because I figured out that 1 loaf costs £1.22. I multiplied that by 5 to figure out what 5 loaves cost. And then what I need to do is use this statement here to figure out 3 bottles of milk. So then what I'm going to do is £9.58 subtract £6.10. 8 take away 0 gets me 8. 5 take away 1 gets me 4. And 9 take away 6 gets me 3. Now this tells me then that 3 bottles of milk cost £3.48, and I'm trying to figure out how much 1 bottle of milk costs. So what I then want to do, £3.48 divided by 3. 3's go into 3 once, remember to raise my decimal. 3's go into 4 once, remainder 1, and 3's go into 18 6 times. So 1 bottle of milk costs £1.16. Okay, let's have a look at example number 3, a slightly different proportion question here. It takes 3 painters 6 days to complete a job. Work out how many days it would take 1 painter. Now, a really common mistake here is to do division. And a lot of people, what they would do is they do 6 divided by 3 and get 2. My suggestion to you is really think about this when you answer it. If it takes 3 painters 6 days to complete a job, is it really going to take 1 painter 2 days, which is less time than it takes 3 painters? Probably not, so you've probably done something wrong. Now, the way we do questions like this is to first and foremost figure out how long the job takes, or how long it takes altogether. So altogether, we need to figure out how many days work it is. So we know that we've got 3 painters and each of them are doing 6 days work. So 3 times by 6 means that we have got a total of 18 days work, okay? So the job must take 18 days because each of the 3 painters takes 6 days, okay? Which means work out how many days it would take one painter. All I then need to do is I need to say, well, if it's 18 days work altogether, one person is going to take 18 days, okay? If I then wanted to figure out how much it took 2 painters, for example, I would just take 18 and I would divide that by 2. So it would take 2 painters 9 days, okay? Okay, example number 4 then. It takes 5 machines 10 hours to produce 10,000 screws. One of the machines breaks. How many hours will the remaining machines take to produce 10,000 screws? And then B, what assumptions have you made in answering the question above? So first and foremost, we need to find the total number of hours, okay? So 5 machines, 10 hours. So if I do 5 times by 10, that tells me that altogether it takes 50 hours to produce 10,000 screws, okay? Now, one of the machines has broken. And the question then says, how many hours will the remaining machines take to produce 10,000 screws? Which means we've only got 4 machines that are working. So it's 50 hours work. To figure out that amongst the 4 machines, we then do 50 divided by 4, and that's going to get me 12.5 hours, okay? So it's going to take 4 machines 12.5 hours. And what I can do is I can look at this. If it takes 5 machines 10 hours, let's think about it. It's obviously going to take 4 machines longer, okay? Now, part B says, what assumptions have you made in answering the question above? Questions like this are always wanting you, this is going to be a 1-mark question, but it's always wanting you to state what you've assumed. And quite often the assumption is that all machines work at the same speed. And the reason that I've made that assumption is because I'm assuming that all of the machines work at the same speed, and so that the remaining 4 machines are going to work at the same speed they worked at when it was 5 machines producing the 10,000 screws. If, however, say for example, these 5 machines, the one machine that's broken is the quickest machine and the others are a lot slower than that one machine, this potentially is going to change and it's going to take even longer, okay? So the assumption I have made is that all machines are working at the same speed. Okay. There's 2 examples here for you to have a go at. So you've got a car travelling 120 miles in 4 hours at a steady speed. You're trying to figure out how far it travels in 1 hour and 7 hours. And then it takes 2 people 4 days to paint a fence. How long would it take 8 people? And again, what assumptions have you made? So think about that speed factor.